Let me say hello to everyone up in the Bay Area and also wherever others might be linked in from. As Marty said, my name's Art Bilger. I have, as Marty just said a moment ago, about people having, 5 careers or whatever. That's I think I'm one of them. And it's actually those multiple careers that I really believe is what brought together the idea of WorkingNation in my head and the execution. Let me mention that the 5-year anniversary since the launch of WorkingNation was this past September. Basically, what we have created and have pulled together an incredible team of people. What we've pulled together is basically a not-for-profit media enterprise to educate the people of this country as to what I believe is the most critical issue we face. Obviously, yes, COVID is a terrible, terrible situation. By the way, I live in Los Angeles, and I will say the spike here since, early December, I guess following right after Thanksgiving, the spike here has been quite dramatic. I hear the same thing for the Bay Area as well as many other locations. Anyway, despite COVID, I do believe the most critical issue facing our nation is the potential of significant structural unemployment, where you're talking about unemployment rates, potential unemployment rates of 10 and 15, 20, 25, even 30 or 35%. And this is over time. But I believe it's as a result of really 4 things coming together like never before in history. And that is globalization, technology, longevity, units of labor, staying in the workforce much longer, and need to stay in the workforce. And then finally, for lack of a better term, broken education, particularly broken because of the other 3 variables accelerating things so much from a dramatic standpoint. This all began coming together in my head about 8 years ago, and I confronted Larry Summers at a big Deutsche Bank dinner in New York. It was the night before the US government might default on its debt. And I had been invited. I decided to go. You probably had about 150 attendees, and major fund managers, top corporate executives, et cetera. And I don't know why it began coming together, but what I just described began coming together in my head. And when Summers opened it to questions that evening, I raised my hand, they gave me a mic, and I laid the beginnings of this out to Dr. Summers. And we had an interesting, back and forth. And then what happened is literally later that evening, I think about 7 or 8 different individuals, none of them knew me, but basically chased me down over the course of the evening and basically saying, I can't believe I've never thought about this. I said, wow, if the top executives and investment fund managers in New York aren't thinking about it, then the average American isn't thinking about it. We've got an issue. I began that discussion on a continuing basis, and I began crisscrossing the country, really trying to explore this with people, who knew a lot more than I did. And ultimately, I decided this. I think I'm right about this. And what I also discovered is that, one, there's a lot of job stuff out there that people don't really know about, real interesting opportunities. And 2, I also found that there were a lot of solutions out there. And I'm talking about solutions being local, what companies do, what not-for-profits, what academic entities, what local government. And but they had no visibility to across the board out there, across society. And so I decided, why not create a not-for-profit media enterprise to educate the people of this country to, one, the issue, but the central mission is highlighting where the job of the future, of the job of today and tomorrow are, and the solutions out there. Now, the reason, it may sound a little crazy to start a not-for-profit media enterprise, but going back to Marty's comment about multiple careers, my original career, yes, when I was a kid, I did shovel snow, and yes, I was a runner on Wall Street when I was 16 years old for a summer. But my first real job was when I got out of grad school at the University of Chicago, a little unknown firm at the time called Drexel Burnham. Fred Joseph offered me a job, and I was, I think, the 21st investment banker at Drexel. And joined originally in New York, but ultimately moved to New York. And one of the areas I did a lot in was media. And part of it being, in '85, I met a really interesting guy. His last name was Turner, first name Ted, and I became investment banker for Turner Broadcasting. Helped Ted buy MGM. I'm the one who figured out how to keep CNN out of bankruptcy in '88. I brought him Hanna-Barbera, start the Cartoon Network, etc. Post Drexel, I was one of the founders of Apollo Advisors. Okay, next step in career, second career. Did a lot of stuff early on in the bankrupt area and buying up, not me personally, but the fund, buying up the bankrupt debt of media companies was a key thing that we did, including Telemundo, for example, in '92. But we also bought up the bankrupt debt, and this we did with Ron Perlman of Revlon fame. We bought up the bankrupt debt of 2 TV broadcasters, put them together with one healthy broadcaster, and courtesy of a $250 million check from Rupert Murdoch, we changed all the affiliations to Fox and created the largest Fox affiliate group in the United States. Anyway, that led to me, finally Perlman asked me to go in and run the company, and actually I did. I went in for about 2.25 years, ran the largest Fox affiliate group of stations. So the concept of creating a not-for-profit media enterprise to educate the people of this country on, as I said, I believe the most significant issue we face, isn't that crazy if you had Ted Turner's investment bank and you ran, Rupert's largest affiliate group of stations. Anyway, post Drexel was my next career, and it probably ties in with a lot of those who are, on this Zoom. I got deeply involved in the venture capital world. I ended up being one of the original funders of Akamai Technologies in '98. I became vice chairman, and that really led to a deep involvement in the tech world, the data world. And that is also what opened my eyes to how fast the world technology was changing the world, including, jobs. And then finally, the third leg on the stool, Mike Milken invited me to invest in a online education company in '02. I told him yes, only if I go on the board and the executive committee. He said yes. And so that has been a primary area of investment ever since. And a lot of it, ed tech, a lot of it is because the critical issues of employment in this country. And major themes of ours at WorkingNation, one is the slope of the curve of the change in jobs and skills when measured against time has never been so steep. By the way, the first piece we launched launched WorkingNation on in September of '16 on CNN was called Slope of the Curve. The second real motivation here is this time, I really believe it's about the heart of the middle class, the heart of this country, the middle class, and it's the squeeze on the middle class. And examples I've always used is the driverless vehicle, #1 job in 30 states driving for a living, those middle class jobs. I don't know how long it'll take, but those jobs are going to be disappearing. The other example I always use is how a marketing department of 10 will become a marketing department of maybe 4 because of data and analytics. And those jobs disappearing are white collar, middle class, and upper middle class jobs. Now, the good news is data and analytics is probably one of the fastest growing jobs in this country. And it's not just MIT data scientists or Wharton school grads, I'll use as an example, because you're listening to the founding funder of the Wharton School's whole data and analytics program dating back to July of '08. But data and analytics is really, and it's, community college programs, certificate programs. It's an example of the type of thing WorkingNation is highlighting for the people of this, this country. Third motivation, and then I'll move on. Third motivation of WorkingNation is never before have we had to re-educate and reskill all the 48-year-olds. And I use 48 to represent people outside of normal academic years, people 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. And the reskilling of, individuals in the society, across society, is critical. And I really believe it can be done. But it really does take real focus out there. And so that's why WorkingNation really adopted this mission and then created the mechanics of this media company. And I will, Lon, you want to put up the next slide? So we have 4 media strategies: video storytelling, where we started, journalism, live events, different cities on different workforce issues in partnership with other organizations around the country, and including some fairly notable. We'll pull up a slide with regard to that shortly. And then podcasts is the 4th strategy. Today we are very connected out there. And basically we're going through 3 audiences. Audience 1 is those same people who chased me around the Deutsche Bank dinner 8 years ago. Because if they understood, they could walk into the head of HR of their company and say, hey, you see what so-and-so's doing? Why aren't we doing something like that? Worst case, they could just write a check to a solution, which is also critical. Audience 2 are those who are working on solutions. Because they can learn from each other. And we've seen great examples of where WorkingNation has put up a video story about a not-for-profit in Boston. And then your average billionaire somewhere in the United States reaches out to me, and they didn't know me, but they connected through some other common friend. And boom, they wanted to know how they could launch, the Boston not-for-profit in their city. So we've seen examples like that, which are critical. And then audience 3 is just mom and pop and young people across this country. Because going back to what I was saying before about data and analytics as an example, I know data and analytics is an incredible employment area in this country. But, the average mom and pop in, Nebraska, they probably don't have anywhere near this is not a criticism of them, it's just not knowledge that they have. And so bringing through our media mechanisms, bringing these types of things to their attention, I believe is very, very valuable. Loni, you want to pull up the next slide? By the way, Loni is the chief of staff of WorkingNation and is sitting in another room operating the mechanics here. Here are major themes, all relating to employment. So many of these themes are things you hear, all kinds of other things. We're only focused on employment. But for example, green jobs. Everyone talks about the environment. There's very little discussion about green jobs. Anyway, WorkingNation launched yesterday. We've done some stuff in the past, but we launched what will be a major green jobs communications effort. We launched it yesterday. We did our first Twitter chat. We are doing all kinds of research on a state-by-state basis now, identifying the broad spectrum of green jobs today and tomorrow. I'm not talking about 10 and 20 years from now. We're focused on today and tomorrow, and the definition of green jobs is far broader than many, including many of you might think. So we're launching that. I think it's probably one of the fastest growing job areas in the country. Veterans is, another area that we've done we did very significant stuff early on, but then in 2019, 2020, we dedicated the months of November to veterans workforce related issues and opportunities. Very successful in so many ways. The Clint Eastwood Foundation, a man who knows the power of media. Clint and his business manager stepped up and did a very substantial matching grant, which then facilitated organizations like JPMHC, Comcast, Apollo, Walmart, and others to step up as funding partners in these. Not just funding, also they threw personnel at this as well. Anyway, you talk about a major theme out there from employment. Diversity, inclusion, we were doing a lot of stuff long before the pandemic. Obviously, the pandemic has accelerated things quite significantly. And so we're going to continue doing a lot more. One of the areas, we're going to emphasize beyond what we've done and beyond what anyone else has done, employment in the, of the Hispanic workforce. You turn on all the Sunday morning talk shows, you hear about Blacks, you hear about women, you hear about Asians, all very important discussions. But you really don't hear much about Hispanics. So that is going to be something we're going to add to our curriculum here. Healthcare is obvious. Disabilities in employment, it's a new area. Autism and other disabilities. It's an area we have not really done much. We're going to begin accelerating that. And then, most of these are my favorite, employment in the not-for-profit world. You're talking about, when you really isolate not-for-profits, you're talking about one of the biggest employers in this country. I believe not-for-profits could be one of the biggest employment growth areas in this country as a result of one good thing, and that is massive amounts of transfer of wealth over the next 20, 25 years. Yes, a lot to families, but I do think a lot to not-for-profits as well. The other two reasons, which are unfortunate reasons. One is the aging of the population, and there's going to be need for greater not-for-profit participation in helping the aging of the population. And then the other is, going back to something I mentioned earlier, a squeeze on the middle class. I do believe not-for-profits, and I believe, it could be very much government funding, but flowing through the not-for-profits. And by the way, I'm not suggesting, we do not run around Washington, D.C., but I'm not suggesting that, federal tax policy and budget policy can't be helpful. But in the end, the solutions are local. And it's those monies and the benefit of those monies flowing through these solutions on a local basis are key. Let me mention one other critical area, particularly, I think, magnified by the pandemic. I think young people are going to have much greater challenges from an employment standpoint. And as a result, internships, apprenticeships, and even national service. And I'm not talking about Israel style with everyone going to the military. Yes, you can do that. But no, I'm talking on a much more localized basis. I'm talking about AmeriCorps, for example. So I do think increasing the slope of the curve and the desire and the availability of internships and apprenticeships, I think, is a very key thing for developing young people. That gap year, that 2-year gap period, I think could be very, very valuable. Lonia, next slide. I've made reference to partnering with organizations. A few of these I've mentioned, Comcast, Clint, and JPMorgan But here you'll see, Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta, and we've also begun to work with some of the other Fed banks as well. Philadelphia and Kansas City are recent parties that we've done Twitter chats for. The Walton Family Foundation has stepped in major funding of our Green Jobs Initiative, and they've agreed to fund research and content development of 6 states up and down the Mississippi, The other two states that we're doing research on right now is Colorado and Pennsylvania. So we, and I think we have Connecticut funded also. So only 41 states left to go. So by the way, California is at the top of our list of research and content development on green jobs. So anyone who has interest in working with WorkingNation on California, we would be delighted. ASU, GSV, by the way, South by Southwest, just we've got 4 or 5 panels coming up with them. So a lot of, and there are many others that we're working closely with. Lumina Foundation, let me emphasize, Lumina has been a terrific funder of WorkingNation over the last 4 years, and I do expect we'll be working closely with them over the next 2 years. And we did actually a major thing with them on the middle class in this particular case on Indianapolis and what's happening, the good, the bad, and the ugly of them from employment. And it was a giant success. We distributed our digital magazine last May with them. So we are picking other geographic locations where those stories ought to be told. We're looking to speak to people throughout this country. So, you know, at the top of our list, Atlanta is clearly at the top of our list. Locations in the state of California, clearly at the top of our list. Detroit, very important. Clearly, location Texas, as well, you know, many others that we really want to highlight what's going on from an employment area. Pacific Northwest, another good example. Anyway, Lonio, is that the last slide? I think. Yeah. So with that, we got about 12 minutes left. You know, let me open it to questions, and you know, happy to address any questions or thoughts that any of you might have. And thank you for your interest and patience in my my presentation.
Hey, Art, it's Marty. How are you?
Very well.
Great. Can Lonio take down the thanks? Perfect. Great. Fantastic. So just can you give us like some samples of some projects that you guys are working on this year and how people form partnerships with you and alliances? I mean, I think you were doing something with like Steve Ballmer's group in Detroit, and obviously you're still involved with Milken. So if you can just give some insight into that. And I think also you're looking at doing some activities in Atlanta.
Yeah. So, you know, going back to that, you know, clearly the most immediate area, and as I've discussed, the green jobs area, and that's, yes, we're aggressively moving forward on that, but we're looking to, you know, really expand it out, you know, clearly geographically more broadly than you know, the 9 states that we've got funded and moving forward. Obviously, we haven't done any, as I emphasized, we haven't done anything in California yet. I do think California really comes to the top of the list on that. So green jobs and how they tie in with localized economies is critical. And I really believe you're talking about, you know, all 50 states in terms of the opportunities of green jobs out there. Other, you know, key areas that we're focusing on, as you just mentioned, Ballmer in Detroit. So I did have the opportunity to speak at a conference called the Detroit Homecoming. This was, I think, early October. And the setup was great. You know, the opening speaker that morning, that Saturday morning, was the CEO of the Ford Motor Company, who, by the way, was fantastic. He did speak quite a bit about electronic vehicles, as you would imagine, but it was very interesting that near his closing, he said, and as a result of all this, we at Ford must focus on workforce development. Well, I practically jumped out of my chair. Actually, I did jump out of my chair and followed him out the door and, introduced myself, shook his hand, and we decided, yes, we should follow up on the whole workforce development as they're thinking about it in the Detroit and other areas where Ford operates. But anyway, I then spoke shortly afterwards, and the woman who runs all of Steve Ballmer's activities in Detroit, which is an incredible array of, not-for-profit and employment and other activities there. The setup was the setup of my speaking was she interviewed me for this conference, and it was really terrific, and she was great. Her name's Kylie Mitchell. And anyway, so we have begun talking with them about doing things much, much more broadly in Detroit. So our hope, no guarantee, our hope is that we will be working closely with them. But we're also beginning, obviously, discussions with other parties who are interested in Detroit and the employment issues. And we're looking to pull together a comprehensive set of solutions and maybe a digital magazine, as we did with Lumina Foundation in Indianapolis, things like that. Texas is now becoming a key area, and we just are connecting very significantly with people and organizations starting in Houston, but we do want to focus much more broadly. Texas being a critical piece of the economy in this country, and it has so much influence out there. Marty, to your question again, California, the Bay Area is clearly very much an area of interest from an employment standpoint. But then, the inland areas in California, where so much is changing. One of the areas that I'm quite interested in, and if there are people here who have interest in it, agricultural jobs. You're talking about a job area that touches all 50 states, even Alaska. But technology is changing those jobs quite dramatically. And actually, we were moving forward with the Johnny Carson Foundation about doing something with the University of Nebraska and Johnny Carson Foundation with regard to ag jobs in Nebraska. Unfortunately, COVID slowed us down. So we actually, I just did a Zoom with the head of the Johnny Carson Foundation just yesterday. And so we're hoping if COVID slows down a bit, we can key that thing back. But ag jobs, so anyone who's got interest or ties into that ag job world is critical. Marty, you mentioned Atlanta, top of our list. We were supposed to, in May of 2020, do an event, a live event with the mayor of Atlanta, with the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta, other organizations in Atlanta, and the Atlanta Hawks. One of the things I've thought about a lot is how do we work with major league sports teams because they capture so many eyeballs of all different income levels, the full spectrum of income, the full spectrum of age. How do we do that? So the Atlanta Hawks agreed to partner with us on that event, and they're doing a lot of stuff in Atlanta with regard to people of need. Unfortunately,
so just in terms of like your dialogue with people, do you speak at like the state government level? I mean, who do you engage with to be able to do these projects that you do at the state government level? Professional sports owner level, general manager, like what's the right level of engagement?
Well, at the government level, we speak at the state level and also the local government level. Mayors. When you really think about it, mayors, government-wise, mayors are the people who truly have to get things done every day. So government, but also we've spoken at the National Governors Association event. So they're going at the sports teams level. Fortunately, I've got a few former partners and others I know who own sports teams. So yes, as a former partner of mine and friend, owned the Atlanta Hawks, Tony Ressler owned the Atlanta Hawks, yes. And so that is clearly how we got in. But we've started then speaking with the CEO of the Atlanta Hawks, and he's really the one who has driven that forward.
So state, municipality, those are really the levels. And then also with people who have community investment and branding, responsibility, so to speak.
That's
right?
That's a great description. The brand, those who have community branding are a key thing. And yes, sometimes, actually frequently, I'll sit down with people who have that type of power, but this is a whole new idea. Now, clearly before COVID, and we obviously launched before, this was a critical issue. Now, COVID, as a dean at NYU said to me, I think this past summer, she said, Art, when you spoke here at NYU in February of 2020, which I did, she said, your opening line was that over the next 10, 15, 20 years, blah, 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 blah. She said, courtesy of the pandemic, I would chop about 10 years off your timeline. And I believe she's right. This has accelerated things dramatically. But the issue is still a very, very critical issue. So I used NYU as an example. We've done stuff with other universities as well. We did a whole data and analytics employment thing with the Wharton School. One of our older worker things, one of our first town hall events was with Rutgers University. So we are looking for major academic organizations. We've done stuff with community college organizations, et cetera. And then to, I guess, still to your question, Marty, major not-for-profits who are focused on workforce development related issues. Yes, I personally am, a believer. You've got to house and feed the disadvantaged, but that's not WorkingNation's focus. Our focus is educating those same people as to employment activities out there. And there really are.
I mean, it's obviously, the teach a man to fish rather than give a man a fish ethos. So, absolutely that works. And what is remarkable is that I think a lot of people that are educated today are really taught that there is a mythical, ladder of success, and that ladder was decimated years ago. And so you have to just be on your feet and be able to self-create and reskill as a way of life. And
absolutely right. That is, look, that's very much what we're about. Let me say one more thing before we have to jump. Major theme of ours at WorkingNation is the linkage between employment and purpose in life. I started thinking about my own career just back in the fourth quarter of 15. Then a woman who now sits on our executive committee, a renowned journalist, many of you may know her, Giselle Fernandez. Giselle I knew from when she was a moderator on Access Hollywood in the late 90s. But Giselle came to me in the first quarter of 16 and brought the movie rights to Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. I don't know how many of you have read it. It's on the Library of Congress's 10 most influential books ever published in this country, or 20 most influential. I told her I didn't have time to make a movie. I was aware of the book, had never read it. I did read it one weekend, and I will tell you, sitting here today, most influential book, from one of the most influential books I've ever read in my life. And Frankel's grandchildren have told me now that I am the biggest purchaser of the book, because whenever I make a presentation or to a smaller group, I ask, and I'll say it to you, who has read it? And if you haven't read it, send me your physical address, because you will get a copy of the book, within 2 or 3 or 4 days. And you will find it incredibly influential. It really did cement in my mind this whole idea of linkage between employment and purpose in life. And that has been a continuing major theme at WorkingNation. I really believe it. It's not just me and you people on the screen. You know, I started.
There's no doubt about it, Art, and there are people who will deny it, but I think that there definitely is a relationship between a person and what they do for the majority
It
of their
brings
life.
that, it gives them, it helps them be part of a community. And being
Yes.
part of a community is a very important thing, I think. And, you know, when you get out of bed in the morning. So